Welcome to Jack's Corner, where conservative values meet national headlines, and truth and reality have a seat at the table. From Louisville, Kentucky, here's your host, Jack Richardson.
Welcome back to another edition of Jack's Corner, where truth and reality has a seat at the table. Well, folks, the news comes at us so fast and furious today that it's difficult to keep up with it, at least in a smooth and logical progression, I guess as an attorney would like it. But today is no different, so we will start with an all-important vote of the House on Trump's budget. It passed last night 217 to 215. Wow, that's close. One Republican, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, voted no. Now, I'm a big supporter of Massie, but some Republicans all too often trip over their own piety. To what end and to what purpose was served by Massie to break with Republicans and side with the Democrats? It's amazing. McConnell did it last week. And to what end and purpose does it serve the constituency to be one of the holdouts when you know that it's not going to make any difference, that it's not going to matter? Now, to make matters worse, we have an enemy like we have never had or seen before in this country. The Democrats, I call them the Democrats, who always vote as a solid bloc. They have nearly destroyed the country, and they are 2 votes away from crushing Trump's chances to save the country. And you want to play sanctimonious games? It just disgusts me. As a lifelong Republican and leader in Kentucky, and when I say Republican, I mean a Reagan-Trump-type Republican, I have marveled at the profound stupidity of my party when it comes to political strategy and sticking together, particularly when it comes to such critical votes like what occurred Tuesday in the House. Too many times Republicans have been their own worst enemy, and too many times the Democrats' best friend. We have to stop that. Now on to some other news. You have heard me refer to the Democrat Party, as I just said, the Democrats. Well, the truth bears that out over and over. In a recent Quinnipiac poll, over 3/4 of Democrats, that's 77%, opposed President Trump's executive order recognizing biological truth. That is, there are only 2 sexes, male and female. How could we have ever slipped into something so deep and dark as that? Well, I blame that on the Democrats. But Trump signed the order that there's 2 sexes, male and female. That should have been pretty obvious. And Trump has not only made that an executive order, but he has ordered that men shall not play in women's sports. That should automatically be a given in our life. But it's not today. Only 14% of Democrats support the order that he signed. Think about that. The party that was big on women's rights, feminism, it's my body, equal pay, et cetera, and now most of them want men in women's sports. So men can literally beat the hell out of women. These people are out of their minds. They are demons. They're demon influenced. What hypocrites. Better yet, this is demonic, and those very demons and those they influence have found an exclusive home in the Democrat Party. On the other hand, most Republicans, particularly on this survey with regards to there only being 2 sexes, 96% of the Republicans and 59% of the independents support the order recognizing biological truth. Think about that, a biological truth. Why would we even have to discuss that? Remember, this podcast is all about giving truth and reality a seat at the table. But frankly, it is more than that, because anything less than the truth is a lie. And if a lie, then it doesn't deserve a seat at the table. So if I can convince enough people of the truth, then maybe they can help remove the liars from the seats of power and influence that they're in. When you are detached from reality, that is called a psychosis, which I discussed in my book, America's Systemic Psychosis. It is a dangerous condition. When your leaders are psychotic, as we experienced with Biden and the Democrats, the harm and suffering is profound, as we experienced over the last 4 years. As I also discussed in my book, the psychosis is inorganic, meaning it has been taught, implemented, and imposed upon us in our schools, our universities, and through the media. This national sickness must be wiped out. It promotes lies and forces you to live in a lie. such as there is more than two genders. The consequence was that the lie established a basis and justification for mutilating children's bodies. That's horrific. These people are monsters. They are demons. Generalizations get attacked all the time as having no merit because we call them generalizations, as if they don't have any merit. But the nasty truth is that they are almost always right. They arise from some element of truth which the Democrats hate. Just as all jest has some element of truth to it, the same goes for generalizations, and in this instance, denying a biological truth, as the Democrats do, should land you in a mental institution. It's no stretch nor exaggeration to refer to the Democrats and the Democrat Party as the party of evil and demons. Their record proves it. Given this reality, it's time for some Republicans to get down off their crosses, quit being so pious, and start locking arms and voting in a block as the Democrats do, as this is our one last chance to get our country back. Now I want to switch over to what I call the Democrats' perversion of the judiciary, and that's really well established. Here's a bit of news on this front, and it really comes as no big surprise. A federal judge, Adam Abelson, who was nominated by President Biden, blocked President Trump's order ending federal support for DEI programs. The judge agreed with the plaintiffs that the executive orders discourage businesses, organizations, and public entities from openly supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. You better believe it. We need that. Of course it does. After all, DEI is a proven racist and discriminatory policy designed to exclude whites and discourages hiring based on merit. This comes just as Pepsi announced that it was eliminating its major DEI role, making it one of dozens of large companies ditching their DEI programs. Frankly, if I were president, I would require all DEI supporters to fly on planes piloted by DEI pilots. That would end the DEI immediately. Once again, we have to deal with these hypocrites all the time. But there is nothing honorable, trustworthy, righteous, or good in the ideologues that the Democratic Party appoint to judgeships, and nothing that has arisen from that party, such as judicial appointments, is good. As Scripture has taught us, a bad tree doesn't produce good fruit. And while I'm on that topic of DEI, I might as well bring this right back home here to Kentucky, where we have some Republican leaders in our state Senate who have been in bed with DEI lovers. To them, I say, you are not in step with your voters or the Republican Party. So get rid of DEI now or resign. And while we are on the topic of judges, here's one for you. A rabid leftist judge, I guess that's really redundant, who was appointed by Biden has just had a complaint filed against her with the higher courts for discipline. The complaint filed by DOJ Chief of Staff Chad Mizell revealed that U.S. District Court Anna Reyes engaged in hostile and egregious misconduct and violated the Judicial Code of Conduct when she treated a department lawyer with disrespect during a 2-day hearing in the case. I saw it. It was beyond the pale. It was atrocious. Had I been an attorney there in the courtroom, I guess I would have ended up being in contempt because I wouldn't have tolerated it. I would have immediately asked her to recuse herself because her conduct was so unbecoming of a judge. No attorney should suffer the disrespect that Reyes displayed. In Reyes' confirmation hearings, it was revealed how radical and vicious she was. She was a partisan, a political activist, but the Democrats voted as a bloc for her. You see, the Democrats care nothing about what is just or fair, only a result that aligns with their ideology. Folks, ideologues have never had anything to offer anyone but misery. They live in a fantasy, a theory, and utopia. It's not reality. For example, Reyes used the inappropriate abbreviation WTF when questioning the DOJ lawyer on his religious beliefs. Can you imagine that? A leftist cannot control themselves, and this judge clearly lacked professional decorum in a most egregious way that revealed such a deep-seated animosity toward anyone outside her warped worldview of a Marxist ideologue. Another example was when Judge Reyes instructed the attorney to sit down because She decided to bar graduates of the University of Virginia Law School from her courtroom because they are all liars and lack integrity. That's amazing. That's a good disqualification right there. We shouldn't have to go through an impeachment process to get rid of somebody like that. But that's who the Democrat Party in the Senate approved and approved for her appointment as a federal judge. Wow, this is where, like I said, impeachment is not good enough. It takes too long. It's not a good enough remedy. The bar is too high for removal with impeachment. We must have a simpler process. And I'm hoping that the judges in the higher courts will basically exercise their authority for a disciplinary action against this judge. Reyes is a vicious ideologue and should be removed from the bench. Biden appointed dozens of these cretins and Pharisees. Once again, a liberal, a leftist, is one suffering a mental disease which exhibits a lack of syllogistic thought, common sense. They have a deep sense of bitterness, rage, and resentment towards others who do not share their beliefs. And those leftist beliefs can and do change according to the situation. They have situational ethics. And when met with any belief system that does not synchronize with theirs, they have dangerous propensities. And they take punitive actions towards people, like they did in this case. They are often the ones who most readily resort to violence, and in more radical cases, murder. They adopt policies that excuse murder, as we have seen when these types of people in the roles of a judge release murderers without bail. Wake up, people. Liberals and leftists have a psychosis and a neurosis which should disqualify them from any position of authority or power over others. That is why I have contended for years that we must have judicial reform. It starts with the judicial selection process and judicial removal. It also would involve totally reforming the jury system. There are areas of our country where you cannot get a fair trial, particularly in big cities. These citadels of atheism, liberalism, and complete intolerance for anyone or anything that holds to traditional values have to be subjected to venue changes. For example, if you are of a certain class or makeup where you clearly will not get a fair trial, you should be able to choose a venue absent these innate prejudices. As I have talked about before, no black person was going to get a fair trial in the 1800s in the South before an all-white jury. The same goes for our big cities today. There is an innate bias and prejudice against whites, religious people, conservatives, gun owners, business people, essentially any constitutionalists and freedom-loving Americans. I have lived and experienced that type of injustice in the courtroom. Injustice is rampant in our judicial system, and Chuck Schumer, Biden, and the entire Democratic senatorial staff are complicit. The good news is that they someday will be judged by the same standards by which they judge. But we should not have to wait until that time, as delayed justice, as I've said, is denied justice. Now I want to shift to something that's basically an interesting example of the consequences of toxic toleration and the power of suggestion. The LGBTQ plus identification in the United States has spiked to 9.3%, an increase that's been driven by Generation Z adults, as polls have basically just found. The percentage of U.S. adults who say they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or something other than heterosexual has nearly doubled from 2020, and it's up from a mere 3.5% in 2012, which has been the historical standard for a long time, and that's according to a Gallup survey. This is the consequence of indoctrination in our schools and universities and government institutions who push that wicked and evil agenda, and it's the agenda of the Democrats. For as long as surveys have been around, this part of deviant society has only been 1 to 3%. This polling is not stable, as it is a temporary blip due to psychological conditioning. But those who claim they identify as such will find they are on an extinction trajectory. And that is good news for the rest of us in the long term, but not so in the short term. The truth always wins out, but at what cost to our children? Never forget the mercenaries in the Democrat Party sacrificed truth and reality for power, and the cost was millions of children who were thrown into chaos, ruining their lives. Now, there's another item in the news that I want to shift to real quick, and that is with regard to Mexico. And Mexico and Canada have both been in the news a lot because of Trump's threat of a 25% tariff on them. And it's what we need because we have huge $1 billion deficits with them. We're basically supporting both of those countries. No, you, the taxpayer, are supporting Canada and Mexico. But let me tell you a little bit about Mexico. Here's something important for you to know, since it is in the news daily, and particularly as it relates to Trump's threat of tariffs. Recently, according to Breitbart News, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum filed a controversial series of changes to the country's constitution, blocking any investigation by foreign law enforcement agencies without their permission. Oh, this is a great one. This would enable Mexico to criminally pursue anyone involved in those investigations. The changes come after the United States designated 6 Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations and announced the intent to eradicate them. Let's do a little background check on Ms. Sheinbaum, who goes by her Jewish name as opposed to her Mexican name, Pardo. The family has a lineage from Europe, and not so surprisingly became members of the Mexican Communist Party. Folks, come on. The apple never falls far from the tree, and you should know that by now. After all, Obama's parents were communists. In fact, card-carrying American communists. They were that American Communist Party type communist. And Kamala Harris's parents were communists as well. But back to the point, the West has always been so suicidally lax and indolent in wiping out the greatest scourge on the earth, and that is the demonic disease of communism. So no big surprise that it is right here on our doorstep in Mexico. But I bet most of you didn't know that. See, most don't want to get back into the background of these people. And particularly, I thought it important to go back into Sheinbaum's history. Because again, the apple doesn't fall from the tree. But not to get too far from the point of this discussion, it is important to know who you are dealing with. Given that Sheinbaum's sentiments are communist, she will naturally gravitate to that which destabilizes normal society, as that is how they maintain control and power, even if it means partnering up with monsters like the cartels. Sheinbaum's changes to the country's constitution would essentially block any investigation or action by foreign law enforcement agencies, like the U.S., without their or her permission. Essentially, that means without the permission of the cartels. The provisions could enable Mexico to criminally pursue anyone involved in those investigations. The changes come after the United States designated 6 Mexican cartels, as I said, as foreign terrorist organizations, and announced the intent to eradicate them. Well, if the Mexican government is going to act like Iran and sponsor terrorists, then they need to be designated as a state of state-sponsored terrorism, and sanctions need to be imposed. Let me ask you this question. What is it about the Mexican culture that seems to lend itself to the flourishing of cartels whose members are truly not human? I won't get into their brutality other than to say that beheadings are probably the kindest things that they do. My advice is not to tolerate those who tolerate and protect the cartels. Ms. Sheinbaum sounds like someone has been placed into her position to protect the crime-ridden government of Mexico. We must deal with them as brutally as a cartel, lest we have a greater danger on our southern border backed by China. It's time for the strong enforcement of the Monroe Doctrine. Let's put up a big keep out sign to the rest of the world. This is our hemisphere, and we must purge this hemisphere of the diseases of the old world lest we become like them. Well, folks, before I wrap up, I want to tell you about something which I believe is about as woke as you can get. Here is more proof that the Democrats are truly mentally ill and dangerous. Democrat Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers introduced a bill that will change state law to replace the word mother with inseminated person. They seethe with hatred towards humanity and God. Truth does not reside within them. They hate anything in the image of God, and now they are trying to destroy the noun mother by designating and referring to her as an object. They labor trying to destroy the language. They are linguistic terrorists. They are demonic and dangerous. Once again, you cannot stand idly by and toxically tolerate these kind of people. You must confront them and anyone supporting them, even if it means challenging family, friends, or neighbors. There is no peaceful coexistence with them, so it's time to take up the fight. And folks, it never has been a better time in the last 40 or 50 years to take up this fight, because Trump has given us that opportunity. So with that, I thank you for being with us today. And remember, don't sit by idly. This is your opportunity to do something and to make it count. So thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you next week.